Hello, my name's Peter Wilson. I'm a member of the Harpenden Photographic Society, and a few days ago it was suggested that I might like to make a video on how I took this photograph, which I entered into the club competition last year in the set subject category, which was movement. In fact, I entered two photographs. This is the other one. And I thought I'd explain on how I did each of them, because they were different challenges which I had quite a lot of fun in solving. The first of which, on this picture, the wine glass, I knew that I needed to freeze the action of the liquid. So the best way to do that was to dim the lights and then use a very high speed flash. And the best way of doing that is to use a flash gun set to a low power setting. I think I had mine set to 1/64th of its normal power level, and that was behind the wine glass through some transparent paper, and I think I had another couple, one to front left and one to front right, which was set to the same power levels. And that's how I froze the action. And the way that I got the liquid to move was very simple. I just held it in my hand. I had a 1 second shutter speed, so I had 1 second to flick the glass, and then I fired the flash gun with remote control in my other hand. As for getting rid of my hand, that was quite easy using Photoshop, and then I took another picture which you can see here, and then I just copied the bottom of the glass, and again using Photoshop joined the two together, and that's how I did the wine glass picture. The rolling dice picture was a different kettle of fish altogether. This time I wanted to see some blur. In addition, I wanted to freeze the action of the dice in the middle of the roll. So I studied and found out that the way to do it was to use a technique called second curtain sync. Now, on pretty much all modern SLRs, this is a picture of the back of my Canon, you just change your settings from first curtain, which is your normal flash setting, to second curtain. And what that means is that the flash goes off at the end of the exposure, not at the beginning. So to explain that, I've got a couple of pictures here. Now the first one is a little toy car coming in from the right hand side of the picture, and the shutter is open for 2 seconds. Now on first curtain or front curtain sync, the flash goes off at the beginning of the exposure, which is why the car is frozen, and then whilst the shutter is still open you get the blur. That is if you've got enough ambient light, and that is why it's photographed against a black background. To get this blurring effect, ambient light is probably the most important aspect of the photograph. You need enough light to expose the object for the time that the aperture is going to be open, in this case 2 seconds. Now we've got the blur in the wrong place. We've got the blur in front of the car, and what we want is to see the blur and then freeze the car. So in this picture we've used the rear curtain sync, or sometimes it's called second curtain sync. So as you can see on the right hand side, you open the shutter for 2 seconds, the car is rolled in from the right hand side, there's enough light in the room to get an image, which is why you get the blur, and then the flash fires at the end of the shutter exposure, which is why you get the frozen car. So that's the technique that I was going to use with my rolling dice photograph. And here's the final image that I used to make the photograph, and I have to say this was one of probably maybe even 200 rolls of the dice. It was on a piece of light absorbent black material, and again I had to play around with the settings. This was 1/2 second shutter speed, and the flash was, again I can't remember, but an off-camera flash set to fairly fast, so it was probably half the power setting. But the key to this whole technique is to get enough light in the room that you get the blur. So I played around with lights in the roof of the house, opening windows, closing windows. It took forever to get the right light settings to get the blur, and then of course I had to get the timing right so that the dice were bouncing when the flash went off. So that's why it took such a long time, and I'm obviously very happy with the result. But of course, photographing on a black background isn't really going to win any competition. So the next thing that I had to do was to transfer that picture onto something that looked a little bit more realistic. So I found a casino table mat from green baize, and kept the camera in the same position that I'd taken the picture of the dice. I just took the black away and then laid the casino mat down so that I got the right angle. Just slightly blurred it. Again, I used a fairly wide aperture to get the blurring effect. And then I just used Photoshop to blend the two together. But the problems didn't stop there, because I'd now got the dice bouncing, but they had to bounce in the right place. So again, that just took technique and time. And then, of course, I needed some shadows. So I just used Photoshop with a paintbrush and some black, and blurred them a little bit, added them to the picture, and that's how we ended up with the rolling dice. I hope you've enjoyed this little presentation, and thank you for listening.